That's it. January 27, 2026. We are in the 4th year, and this is day 338 since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Welcome. I greet you. For the daily situation report, in today's report, we will look at some very, very questionable statements from the Russian generals. We will also look at what kind of project the Ministry of Defense on the Russian side is currently undertaking. In addition, we will see Russian airstrikes on Ukraine and much more. The Russians, or rather, the head of the Russian General Staff, Gerasimov, we still remember him, especially from the disputes between him and Prigozhin. And he explains here, in the circle of a public conference, that the Russian army is said to have captured a suburb of Kupiansk. Let's take a look at the whole thing on the map. So, Kupiansk is located here. The Russians were pushed back just a few weeks ago. Zelensky took a photo at the blue pin to show that, as president, he can enter a supposedly fully occupied city without incident. As I mentioned, the Russians were pushed back to this line, and fighting is happening here again. It's still a bit unclear whether the Russians were able to advance on the east side of Kupiansk, or if it's just scattered units. Nevertheless, it has shown that Russian statements about territorial gains are, of course, not always accurate. And we've known that throughout the entire war. This is a great extreme example since we're talking about a small town, not just a row of trees or a village. And the situation around Kupiansk looks about like this. Up here near Sinkivka, it's a bit less clear. As I said, there's a large gray area here. We haven't received any geolocation from here for a long time, and neither side can really prove which one has control over this area. But the village that the Russians are now supposedly said to have captured is located here. That would be about 11 kilometers away from the front on my map, so it's highly questionable again. Other providers also look at different situation maps on almost every map except for this one, from 2 Russian bloggers who literally draw everything they hear without verifying it. The map should look similar. I've now marked the geolocation from the last 2 days. Here, for example, we see a Russian drone attacking Ukrainian forces, specifically in the north of Pesheni. Down here, we also see a Luftwaffe airstrike with a freefall bomb or a glide bomb. Here, a bit further south from the supposedly captured location, also targeting Ukrainian positions. Here we see a drone attack that happened today, right at this spot. And there's also another drone attack here, also targeting Ukrainian soldiers at this point. So what we can see very clearly from this is that the Ukrainians are located where the red pins are. Otherwise, the Russians wouldn't attack this position. If they'd already captured everything, they wouldn't attack their own positions. Well, of course, that's a bit ironic now, since we saw yesterday how the Russians often bomb their own city, namely Belgorod, with bombs. But this is a completely different scenario. Here we have drones that aren't randomly dropping grenades on positions, or doing so because of a technical malfunction. That means we can assume that there were actually Ukrainian soldiers there when the Russians attacked. What we also see is a sighting of a Russian flag from yesterday. Here is a drone filming the Russian flag. I've circled it very subtly. I know there's a situation reporter in the German-speaking world who draws more circles than me, but this is a Russian recording meant to show that they are on site by filming one of their flags. How it got there is, of course, questionable. It could have been dropped by a drone. We've seen that happen very often. It's also possible that a single Russian soldier somehow managed to plant this flag by skillfully bypassing Ukrainian lines. Or the Russians might have advanced to that point with a group or platoon. But I find that highly unrealistic, especially considering that quite a few Ukrainian positions were attacked here today. And that happened over a really large area. So the most likely scenario is that it was either dropped here by a drone, probably the same one that filmed it, by simply being able to claim territorial gains for themselves, or by having 1 or 2 soldiers manage to advance that far, but we don't see any of that. Regardless of that, any geolocations from the Russians from this place here don't matter. I spent the whole day today searching through Russian channels after this report, but there's nothing. The closest thing to it is this single flag that's here, which of course contradicts all the attacks on Ukrainian positions in the surrounding area. I think we'll soon see this as another false report. Russian soldiers are surrendering for the first time ever documented to an unmanned ground vehicle, that is, to an unmanned ground vehicle, which we've often colloquially referred to as a ground drone. The video shows the scene from the drone operator's perspective. The drone encounters 3 Russian soldiers, one of whom I had to censor because his camouflage cover was covered in blood. YouTube dislikes this, and the algorithm has punished me for 2 months. As always, the uncensored version is on Telegram. The Russians abandon their position and lie down on the ground in front of the drone, so they are not surrendering to infantry, but to a remote-controlled combat platform. This is the first time such a case has been documented, and that is something historic. And, as usual, you see it here first. To keep it that way, please subscribe if you haven't yet. The video is from the 3rd Assault Brigade in the Lyman area. They are currently using the Unmanned Ground Vehicle S very often and increasingly. And they also became known for being able to hold and defend an intersection north of Pokrovsk for several weeks a few months ago, also with the help of an unmanned ground vehicle. So here we see another change in the war in Ukraine, which will certainly have a major impact on future conflicts and wars as well. The Russian Ministry of Defense is now actively recruiting students nationwide for unmanned forces. They are openly advertising a supposedly 1-year contract that could be terminated at any time. Why do I say supposedly? Well, you are right. The contract can be terminated at any time, but only by the Ministry of Defense itself. And for the past 2 years, it has also been the case that contracts with the Russian Ministry of Defense, even if they have a set term, can be extended indefinitely at any time by the Ministry of Defense itself without consent. So as long as Putin's mobilization decree is in effect, you are always bound to the Ministry of Defense for an indefinite period. It doesn't matter whether you signed up for 6, 8, 12, 24, or any other number of months. However, Russian media report that this recruitment campaign for drones and unmanned units began in mid-January. Students are promised that the deployment will only mean a temporary interruption of their studies. In reality, however, it is a completely regular contract with the military without a guaranteed discharge. After a year at Bryansk Technical University, students were explicitly informed about an alleged 1-year contract and were also asked to confirm that they had been informed about it, just to be sure, in case no one comes back. There have been similar cases before at the Higher School of Economics. There, the university administration even admitted that the students had signed regular contracts with the Ministry of Defense, with the possibility of being deployed at the front or in assault units. You can probably guess who decides about this possibility. It will most likely not be the students. The development indicates Russia is increasingly addressing personnel shortages by targeting young, inexperienced people. At the same time, they are using downplaying promises that are not legally guaranteed and contradict the real conditions of deployment in the war. Russia is also doing this well, and from their perspective, it's absolutely necessary. If you don't want to fall behind in a drone war, you need new pilots. And being a drone pilot sounds especially appealing to a student. Just think about their situation for a moment. Put yourself in the mind of a Russian student. Most of the recruited Russians who volunteered did so because of high bonus payments and a promised salary that was higher than what you would earn, for example, as a welder, locksmith, farmer, or metal caster. They risk death to earn a year's salary in months, hoping to survive. If not, their family still gets the money. A severance payment that could allow you to afford an apartment or two. A possibly educated student who could have access to better paying jobs, regardless of the economic situation, would not take this risk in the same way. Why should you waste years at another school, only to spend several more years studying afterward? So you end up with the same fate as someone who didn't do all that? If anything, they choose the safe positions in the military. And a drone pilot, sitting in a secured trench 40 to 60 kilometers from the front with a fiber optic drone, steering it toward Ukrainian soldiers, usually lives less dangerously than someone who has to attack a well-fortified Ukrainian position across an open field, lightly dressed and poorly armed. That, of course, makes it easier for the Ministry of Defense to target this group this way. Shall we move to a similar topic? In Russia, drone studies are now a major subject in many middle schools, similar to weapons studies. There are some special schools where this has now been integrated, but that's also the right thing for Russia to do. This won't be the last war, and wars need soldiers and pilots. And in this way, Russia is securing a generation of fanatical drone-savvy people who will either further develop them or have already learned to handle them at an early age. I think other countries should actually do something similar, especially here in the West, because once again we're lagging behind and not thinking ahead. During my bachelor's at my university, I took a course where this was attempted. A team from an engineering program was supposed to develop and build a drone, and we from a computer science program were supposed to write the corresponding software for it. Our drone was supposed to fly to specified coordinates and then drop a water bottle at those coordinates once it reached them. Do you see the parallel to war? But we only had a group of up to 20 people, and it only happened once a year. Now imagine the knowledge on the Russian side if they put entire year groups across the whole country through intensive courses, while for us it was just an optional side project. Think about that. Because drones will almost certainly accompany us in future wars as well. And if we ever find ourselves in one, even though that would of course be the worst case scenario, it would catch us extremely unprepared, especially within our own population. Last night, Russia attacked Odesa again, damaging a church and a kindergarten in the city center. At least 2 were killed and 3 injured, according to initial reports. Elsewhere in the city, a residential building was partially destroyed. Rescue workers think residents remain trapped under the rubble. The situation is unclear, and search operations continue. Thank you to all subscribers, channel members, and the Albu crew, especially Lieutenant Colonel Renica, Robert Stiller, Dietrich Bredy, and Mayor Hofer. Please subscribe, like, comment, and see you in the next report.